Thanks very much. I'd like to start by explaining how we put together our panel, because our session is business and design, so you know, after a lot of discussion with the organizers, we decided to put together a bunch of people who have different views from different parts of industry. So if I start over here, Johan is he's been a management consultant. He's worked in large organizations. He's a service design guy. All right, so you want service design, this is your guy over here. He's worked in telecommunications, he's worked in financial services, and so on. Right next to him is Dale Dutton, and Dale has worked, he's not a designer, but he designs all the time. So he's worked in software, he's worked in the mining industry, he's got a wide range of experience of applying the design way in places where we don't normally talk about it inside the design bubble. And then we have Gourley, who is representing the largest, most successful design-based company in the history of South Africa. Outrageously successful company. He's the Chief Creative Officer over there, and he's in that's in the retail sector. And then over there we have Ulrich. Ulrich has also worked with large corporations. He's seen the guts of them. He's seen how innovation works inside of them. So he's going to be bringing that perspective to us as well. All right. So I wanted you to get an idea of the different kind of guys that we've got coming up here. They'll explain themselves as well. So unusually, the moderator gets to speak on this session. Is that okay? Do I have permission from the audience? Because I thought, you know, I know at least a third of you, at least by sight, and so, you know, this is going to be the second or third time. But for the rest, let's get on to the same page. Is that okay? All right. So in my view, design is so familiar when you're designing the world's best trauma scanner, the world's best chicken cleaver, and Facebook for dogs, you know, because wherever we go, product and services companies are used to using design. It's a part of their DNA. This is something that's familiar to all of us. Great. And, you know, so many exciting things happened to me this morning listening to the speakers talking about how the sophistication of design goes up these ladders and so on. And I guess we're following a similar path in what I'm saying today. Large corporations also, this is all my direct experience of what I've seen organizations sometimes trying to grapple with that fits a design pattern. So large organizations internationally and even locally using a design approach to solve problems that are not necessarily related to a product or service outcome. And, you know, the list goes on. All of these companies that you see up there have tried to grapple with this design approach, and sometimes quite successfully, because large organizations need growth, they need innovation, and they need the supply of awesome goods and services so that they can achieve their growth objectives. Also, what I've seen is international finance organizations, and you know, we were involved in this Access to Energy Global Report for the World Bank, using a design approach to look at a mega problem in the world and see how can you apply the pattern of the design approach, the design way, the design thinking, the process and doing to try and look at a problem like that. We've also seen local funders increasingly using the design approach, and I don't just mean the nice graphs over there, really using a design-oriented approach to how projects are funded, how organizations are started up, how funds are allocated towards different parts of the economy. And we've seen that increasingly locally in South Africa as well. Because funders need a pipeline. And as we all know, there's more funding available from funders in the world than there are fundable projects. So whenever people speak to me and say, well, you know, I've got this thing, but money's a problem, money's never the problem. The value of what you're offering to the fund available is usually the problem, because the capital is available. It might be concentrated in certain places, but it's available. In my own experience also, in launching, we've started a one little business that's building, and many of you will know about it, a safe kerosene stove that doesn't burn down people's homes in South Africa, which is a huge social problem. We've been really challenged to apply design in not only manufacturing and not only in processes and systems, not only in packaging, not only in their sales application that we have to use that runs on smartphones, but bringing all of that together in a designerly way. And even as professional designers, the challenge of of tackling all these multiple layers of complexity inside of a business have been for us quite challenging and exciting. And we've seen that with other entrepreneurs that we've worked with, particularly at the SABS Design Institute, where it's product, packaging, process, business model, most importantly. And we're talking about business. The design of business model, for me, is an exciting topic. And I think it's an underappreciated topic amongst designers. And I think we've heard that several times. So all of these entrepreneurs have had to design a product or a service or something, but primarily they've had to design a value proposition inside of a business model. Because small businesses, entrepreneurs need a kickstart, and they need the kind of assistance that gets them into making money. And hopefully doing something good for society as well. I'm not averse to it, but we're in the business session. And then we've also then looked, and we're stepping out for a second to look at bigger problems. If you take an industry like African traditional medicine, and you apply a design approach to looking across an entire country, across an entire industry, how would you redesign that industry to perform more successfully for its country, to be more equitable, to be more environmentally responsible, to be much more sustainable economically? You would follow the same design approach that you would use for anything else. So you would understand the context, you would understand the users very deeply, you would live in their houses, you would follow them around, you'd understand how they think about things, you would have to deal with all the complications and the constraints involved, you would have to figure out how the whole thing works and how the pieces fit together, and you would have to figure out how the money is made. You would have to design a way in which the money can be made in some cases, where for this industry particularly, the money is not being made. So you would have to design a new kind of value that can be brought into an entire industry. And so I love this picture. I show it very often because it takes all of the problems in this particular industry and they're categorized into sections that designers would understand, and they come down eventually through a design process, through a lot of problem solving, through a lot of consultation with many people who are designers and who are not designers officially by trade, but are acting in a design way, and produced 10 items, a list of 10 things to do, which are relatively straightforward, understandable things, not necessarily easy things, that would completely transform this industry in the ways that I've described. And that, for me, is the beauty of design, is that it takes the chaos and complexity and it turns it into something which is elegant, simple, doable, and produces the result that you're looking for. We've also increasingly seen in our work with the Design Institute how national departments are starting to accept the idea that if you're making new things like policy and then implementing policy and building infrastructure that has to deliver social services and other things, that you could use an approach which is more structured, it's more disciplined, it's designed. It's a design process. And so we've seen all of these departments in recent experience, including some very, very dynamic and interesting things out of our national treasury, the place the money comes from, who, I'll give you this example because it helps, who asked, how do we take our best practice for managing budgets that our economists at the treasury use on a daily basis, how do we productize that, turn it into a consumer product that any municipal manager in any town in South Africa could use and perform at the same level of excellence as we do in Treasury with all of our experience and knowledge? Isn't that an incredible thing to hear from a person in Treasury? I mean, that was one of the great highlights of my year so far. All right. Because government delivery also needs good design, and we've heard that many times today. So then I guess the point for me is that we have in business this kind of ecosystem. I'm going to take the entrepreneurial view because that's where I come from. So you have all of the elements of society: entrepreneurs, the education system, society, government, large corporations and funders working together. And the degree to which they interact is the interesting part, because entrepreneurs provide deal flow to funders. That's what funders need, otherwise it would not exist. Entrepreneurs provide a supply and innovation to large organizations. If you look at how large organizations really create innovation, it's mostly through smaller companies that they work with. Entrepreneurs also provide services to government because they help government to deliver on its objectives. And they deliver to society opportunities like jobs, for example. They also give opportunities to education. Education, on the other hand, provides the talent everywhere. I've sent the talent to government and I've sent it to the large organizations, but education has this enormous role to provide talent throughout the system. Whereas government has its mandate to society is to create a better life in South Africa. And you have government also providing then this kickstart to entrepreneurs, particularly in the South African context. There are large amounts of money, vast amounts, available for anybody that wants to do something that creates socio-economic change in our country, directly from government. And then large organizations have responsibility for citizenship to government, and of course provides opportunities to society like employment. So, you know, we could carry on drawing lines all day long. Large organizations also have to give entrepreneurs offtake. So the degree to which this system is integrated and working positively together, in my opinion, is the degree to which policy and the execution of policy in the business of design is successful. So I guess that's my point, right? If you want the design of business to be successful, the ecosystem that we're looking at over here needs to be designed to succeed. I guess that's my point. So I honestly believe that once we achieve something like that, we can design a better economy, we can design a better country. Thank you.
So I'm sitting across an executive of a major multinational company, and what he's saying is music to my ears. He's saying, Johan, we've tried all the major consulting firms, and every time we get the same vanilla solutions. By the time we launch our services, our competitors have launched exactly the same service and almost exactly the same time. He says, I think a user-centered design approach will fundamentally change the way that our business works, provide value to our customers and ourselves, and really offer differentiated services to our clients at the end of the day. And I'm sitting there and thinking, brilliant, this guy finally gets it, that we're going to do some awesome work together. And then the smile suddenly disappears off my face as the conversation progresses. And he says, we've been looking for the last 2 years for the right skills and experience in South Africa, but unfortunately, we haven't found anybody that can assist us. Can your company assist us in building our own team? We want to employ about 25 people, and we want to upskill them. Can you second some of your best experience from your international office? Now, this should have been a good news story to me, but unfortunately it wasn't, because I've heard this story play out several times during the previous 6 months. We were trying to set up our own consultancy locally in South Africa, international design consultancy firm, and we couldn't find the skills. And several other meetings I had with other large multinational potential clients had almost exactly the same request. Unfortunately, there isn't enough service design professionals today in South Africa to meet the demands of large corporates. And our labor department, with our very bureaucratic labor laws, don't allow us to attract international talent. But I think if we work together as government, business, educational institutions, and the local design consultancies, that we can actually solve this problem. See, our educational institutions have been focusing predominantly on product design and industrial design and graphic design over the last couple of decades, and they've done a brilliant job at doing that. But they've unfortunately neglected service design. Our large corporates have invested all of their bursary funds in maths and science students and don't spend anything on any design bursaries. The local design community or the local design consulting companies are quite small and fragmented, and they also predominantly focus on product design. And on government side, as I mentioned, the labor laws are quite restrictive of attracting the right international talent to our shores. We would have to look at this problem from a demand side and a supply side. Demand side is corporates and the supply side. If we don't do this, we're going to keep on creating this copy and paste economy that we've got. We copy our service models from overseas. We don't understand the local context. We implement, and it doesn't work for our audiences. And the same with our educational institutions. We're not going to provide the right skills that we need in the future for our economy. There are about a dozen large corporates today that are willing to employ between 5 and 20 designers in their organizations. I believe they can provide us with a financial kickstart to start a proper service design profession in South Africa today. But it's up to the corporates as well as the local design consultancies to go and speak to the Department of Labour and try and get these critical skills on the critical skills list. I know the opportunity for comments has already been closed in June this year, but I think it's critical to try and re-engage with government and try and get those service design professional skills on that list. The current solution that we've got in terms of large corporates is bringing in international design consultancies. Unfortunately, it's not a sustainable solution for us over the long term. And the main reason is it's extremely pricey to bring in an international design consultancy firm. We don't really transfer the skills and knowledge. And those firms cannot provide the experience and skills for the terms of these projects. It's just too many people that they require for such a long period of time, so they can't build up the teams. If government changes the labour laws and allows us to bring in service design professionals on that critical skills list, I think we can attract these service design professionals in individual capacity, bring them in through large corporates, place them inside of the organizations where they can have a sustained impact for a 2 to 3 year period, and they can then also influence our local curriculum with our educational departments and shape that and recruit new graduates in internship programs and upskill them in their experience. Our local design consultancies can also then go and employ some of these international experts and augment their own experience and knowledge in service design. This is going to be a team effort, the same way that service design is a team effort. And if we do this, I think we can, it's just these small steps, but if we can do it, I think we can fundamentally change the service design industry in South Africa to build a service-driven economy by South Africans and for South Africans. Thanks.
I started out in aviation industry, an industry that is exceptionally well regulated, a very rigid industry, and there's a good reason for that. There's lives at risk. And if you're driving between Cape Town and wherever, and you pick up a problem with the car, you can always pull to the side of the road. You don't have that luxury in an aircraft. So anything that you do that relates to an aircraft has to adhere to very, very stringent standards. The first project that I was involved in was an upgrade to a military aircraft. Now, if you think the commercial aviation has high standards, the military is absolutely over the top, but understandably so, because the environments that they work in are a little different to what we're used to in our everyday life. So it was with that as a basis that I started in that project as the coordinator for the avionics that was to go in the plane. So my function on the project was to ensure that all of the electronics spoke to each other in the aircraft. Now, you think it's difficult getting people to talk to each other. You must try getting systems to talk to each other. But be that as it may, there's a lot of detail that goes into the design and integration of systems into an aircraft. And one of the fundamental reasons for that is a pilot doesn't have a huge amount of time to make a decision if something goes wrong. So they need to have information available to them at the tips of their fingers. And a fighter pilot, even less so, because an airline pilot can still go and look for the information somewhere in the system. A fighter pilot has a fraction of a second between him making it and not making it at all. So it was with that as a basis that I eventually got into business software. And one of the mantras that they drummed into us going into the business software was that software design is all about 80% planning and 20% execution. Now, coming out of aviation, I'm thinking to myself, why do they spend such a little time planning? Surely they should put more into it. And the more I got involved in projects and that in software, the more I started realizing that some of these guys are actually, they're doing this by the seat of their pants. They're really not putting a whole lot of thought into what they are doing inside of the business. So the first couple of projects that I sat on, I sat and I listened, took note of what was happening around me. And the one thing that I picked up was, generally on a project, 30% of reporting that is generated is only used in the first couple of months. Thereafter, it's ignored. And I thought to myself, but somebody spent time and effort developing this, and it's just getting tossed out the window after a couple of weeks or months. So I started analyzing why is this, and had a look at the project teams that were being put together, and suddenly realized, but hang on a minute, these comfort reports, as I like to call them, are just there to build trust. The stakeholders in the project and that are not necessarily understanding their business at grassroots level. They don't understand where things are happening on the ground in their business. So they're engaging managers to define requirements from a software perspective. And these guys are missing the boat. So in the projects that I got involved in, I started trying to influence the people to get the users that are actually going to be using the system at the end of the day to get involved in the design and the development of the products that are going to satisfy their need at the end of the day. And it was incredible to see the difference that it made to the outcome, because now all of a sudden you've got 30% revenue to go and pump into additional functionality or even research to be able to produce a feasible solution for the business. And the next sort of step for me was to get into ERP systems. Now that is a monster of note. It's a one-size-fits-all philosophy that doesn't work at all. So there's basic functionality in place, and there's very good controls in place in those systems. But you've got some restrictions, and you have to customize the system. There's no way you can go and take it off the shelf like Excel, plug it in, and it works. Now that also has some inherent problems when you're implementing, because once again, you need to know exactly what the business requires. And in order to understand what the business requires, we're going back to users. Now, these ERP systems, they're useful in terms of that they probably give you a 60% functionality fit. But the customization that you need to do, if you don't have accurate information about your business, is going to miss the boat completely. So when working inside of these ERP environments, it's now a question of going from an environment where you could develop software as a free-for-all. So you had a platform which was just a picture from which to work, and you could develop to your heart's content, to working inside of a system that all of a sudden restrains you. Because where you used to be able to step a little bit off the step over there, the system now stops you. And one of the things that I encountered with working with these big ERP systems is that they are incredibly data hungry. And what I mean by that is you switch the system on and you get into the first screen, and there are just fields to enter data into for Africa, quite literally. And they'll either give it into a long screen where you've got hundreds of fields that you need to populate, or else they'll give you multiple screens with a whole lot of these things. And I took a look at this and I thought to myself, but there's got to be an easier way. There has to be an easier way to do this. And started, after digging around in the system for a while, started realizing, but hang on a minute. Here we've got a lot of the data that is being requested from the user already in the system. So why aren't we just giving it back to the user and letting them make decisions based on that? And in investigating this, I discovered that there's actually a huge opportunity in that with ERP-based systems. But that also produces some interesting results. I've had some strange requests. I had one user come to me and ask me for a one-button report. When I started looking into it, it turned out it was 3 different reports, completely unrelated. And how they were wanting me to achieve the one button gives them this and the one button gives them that, I don't know, because they never gave me the criteria for what the output was required. And you know, sometimes you sit back and you think to yourself, do these people actually think about breathing, or did they just breathe? I had another person ask me for a report that just about extracts the entire database and displays it on the screen. And you think to yourself, my word, what was he thinking when he thought that up? But one of the greatest success stories that I've had is a paper-based system at a company where their payroll is a bonus-based system, and access control to specific areas dictates what the bonuses are. And the paper-based system used to take from when the form is filled in to when it arrives in payroll and is updated the payroll system, 2 weeks. This was costing the company in excess of 5 million rand a month on their payroll, because of inaccurate data in the system. We spent a lot of time around design, around detail, getting information, finding out what was required, what information was going to be available to us, and how quickly we could process this information. We took that entire 2-week process and reduced it to seconds in the functionality that we made available to the business, integrating that into payroll and into the access control system. And it absolutely revolutionized the business. It's freed up time for the people that did the processing like you cannot believe. A 15-minute process was now all of a sudden taking seconds to do. So they were accomplishing what they required in a short time frame, which has freed them up to then innovate in their own departments and look for ways to optimize and different ways of maybe increasing the scope of their responsibility within the business. So then we realized, but hang on, business is all about people. To build a successful business, you need to build successful people. And I think that's key to software development as a whole. If you can build into the lives of people, you can build into the life of the business. And one of the things that I was saying to one of the project managers was that we are human by birth, but we are people by design. Thank you very much.
Cool. Thanks. Thanks, guys. Right, a little bit contextually about us. I think before I dive into a case study, I'd like to share with you. We were a company that started here in South Africa about 20 years ago, a company called Barrows. Very proud about our South African heritage, and over the last 20 years, we've expanded globally to 8 core offices around the world, servicing developing and developed markets similarly. But like a lot of our clients that we handle, we project a large part of our growth in the future to come out of developing emerging markets. And personally, I spend a lot of time in those markets. I think they're the most exciting markets, some of the most amazing innovation happening in those markets, and a great place to learn from as we go forward. And I love that comment made in one of the speeches earlier this morning about that double leapfrog concept. I really do believe we've kind of watched what's happened in developed markets, and I think we can learn a hell of a lot from it and not make the same mistakes, learn the learnings that we're occurring in developing markets, and jump right on. We work across a spectrum of clients, big global clients, Coca-Cola, Procter & Gamble, Gillette, Unilever, Adidas, many more in that list. And then also with retailers specifically, so the Walmarts, Targets, Asda's, Tesco's, et cetera, of the world. So we work both sides of the retail spectrum, both with the manufacturers and with the retailers themselves. And something that I'm finding is a sort of a personal little, it cheers me up and it kind of is interesting to watch, is that I'm seeing these giants starting to quake in their boots a little bit at the moment, because they are starting to realize in a very rapid fashion that the way they've been doing things up until now is not possibly, it cannot possibly the way that they've got to do things going forward. And they're scrambling around and they're looking for how they do things differently. And guess what keeps floating to the top? It's design and it's innovation and it's different ways of thinking about how they should approach it. They've done everything they can to save costs, to improve efficiencies, et cetera, et cetera. They just haven't pushed the big old innovation buttons and the design buttons, which I think is a large part of where we're going to be going now. I'd like to share one case study with you very briefly. It is a case study that came off our inherent desire within our business to start recognizing this need that people have in business and within companies themselves, to start linking up with businesses with a much stronger sense of purpose. Why do we exist? How do we use our power? How do we use our scale to actually make people feel good about getting up in the morning and going to work and doing something that they can achieve change on a global stage? When you work with clients like Coca-Cola across the world, you've got huge scale at your fingertips there. Now, how do we use our influence? How do we use our presence to use that to an advantage? So we didn't start with a particular brief in hand. We didn't have a client that came to us and say, I needed this specifically. We just knew we had to start it. We knew we had to begin it, and we had to just get on with it and, like the screen says, make a plan. And I think it's interesting to note as well the landscape of innovation for us. I find there are 3 key factors that I see float up to the top for this landscape of innovation, for the seed of innovation to take hold in this landscape. One is actually I prefer no budgets. I find when you've got loads of budgets, guys start to waffle and take time and et cetera, but I find when you limit the budgets, it actually increases the thinking remarkably. Guys, we haven't got a lot of cash, but we need to make a plan over here. Another thing that's critical when we work in these innovation areas and in emerging markets is I've seen the desperation firsthand in India, in parts of Africa, all over Africa, Latin America, Mexico. It's survival 101. People are just trying to make it through their life. And it's desperate stuff. And you juxtapose that with what's happening in developed markets, and you almost get a sense of repulsion and sickness at how much money and stuff exists within developing markets to give people a leg up. Emerging, it's survival. And the third point I think that's critical is the attitude. I'm consistently humbled by the attitude that exists in emerging markets to never give up, to consistently make a plan, to fail, experiment, try again, but claw your way up and do something, which is, in essence, making a plan. The other big thing that we saw in our travels around the world and trying to think about how to define a project entry point was how could we focus in on power. That was a real tipping point around businesses that really succeeded or gave business opportunities or entrepreneurs an opportunity to succeed in emerging markets, was the existence of power. So this is a classic slide of a village that takes it in turn to ride a bicycle that powers a car battery that then charges cell phones, etc., so that they can start to communicate, start to run businesses, transfer money amongst communities. And I could go on forever. This is another one of a guy that's run a power cable from the apartment block above to a double adapter hanging on a wall to a razor, and he's got his little hair salon going. I'm constantly, like I say, humiliated and inspired when I travel around these emerging markets with this amazing sense of people making something out of absolutely nothing and getting on with it. So we asked ourselves the question, how could we put a plug point in the middle of nowhere? How could we do something that could actually deliver this power out there? And we looked up to the sky, not in any religious context, but actually at the sun, and looked at that as a potential source of sustainable energy that we could work with, and opportunities that could give us is around internet connectivity, cellular, chilled opportunities, lighting opportunities, and portable power. And we set about, in our own divisions and teams and R&D process, we started working for nearly about a year and a half, working on a structure that was a predominant structure that you find in developing and emerging markets, which is the hawker kiosk type structure, by far and away the most standardized retail system that you see out there. And we started working with engineers, our own engineers. We've got a large squad of engineers. Our team around the world is about 700 strong, but it's comprised of product graphic design, etc., and a large part of it is engineering as well. And the combination of the two worked on zeroing in on how do we refrigerate products and how do we freeze products for a lot of our clients. And we started developing, our original prototype was working with a solar panel company in Germany to develop robust solar panels themselves. This entire solar panel system collapsed down, slid down and hid behind the unit, and the unit itself was portable and you could carry it away, and that one was a great success for us. That one we managed to achieve the target of keeping ice creams frozen at minus 20 degrees for a period of 3 days, even without sun, which was a huge opportunity. We've had a lot of interest expressed from the medicinal companies as well as how do we get medicine out into developing and emerging markets as well, if we've got this refrigeration technology and processes. And that was a global first, that particular one. And a little bit about it, we've run over the summer, this last summer now in Central Park. We ran, that's what the finished prototype or model actually started looking like, so we ran models with that in Central Park over the summer, testing this with shoppers and consumers and really answering a lot of the strategy that exists within our clients' organizations. You've probably heard the saying, doing good is good business, and a load of our clients that we work with have that woven into their corporate strategies and mantras about what they're trying to do. So us taking the initiative to start trying to develop these sustainable products and models was a big jump forward, and something that we found was absolutely critical and has resonated with them. So Unilever sponsored a particular project with the solar ice creams. These units also generate a small Wi-Fi zone. They charge cell phones. They generate multiple other power points. And something that is also interesting to see is that when you do start putting these structures out into the market, the thing I love about developing in emerging markets is you can think it's going to go in to do something. You go back 6 months later and something else magical has happened on top of this thing. They've linked it up. They've found a warehouse around the corner where they've grouped together to store these things, and they've set up their own little franchise businesses. It's fantastic. So you just inject a bit of innovation into an emerging market with all your first world thinking and et cetera, and then you sit back and watch the real magic start to happen, and you start to learn and experiment and play on top of that. So we very much are at that experiment and learning phase at the moment right now. And recently we did all the, not a freezing model, but this was a cooling model. So we did all the stadiums at the 2014 World Cup in Brazil. So all of the stadiums there had the Coca-Cola solar coolers, which was a fantastic benefit for them. And I think Coca-Cola is an interesting company to work with as well, where they've made sustainability such a massive drive. Their global CEO, Muhtar Kent, has rebranded himself as their Chief Sustainability Officer. And this project has gone down incredibly well in the Coca-Cola business, as it has in the Unilever business now. And we are now exploring partnerships with other companies, and I say medicinal companies as well, to try and drive this sort of innovation going forward. But I think the point I made earlier on about it really answering a lot of sense of purpose questions where we want to work on this kind of stuff. It's an exciting project to work on. You start to feel like you're doing good through the process of design has been very beneficial, and we see a lot of this sort of stuff happening more and more with our clients as we grow and expand. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. No, I don't need that one. Thanks. Yeah, the narrative between the conversation around design and business, I think, is changing quite fundamentally. So allow me to provide a little journey of how I see that change playing out in the next few years and actually months to come. As some of the other speakers have kind of identified, large corporates, large businesses, our clients, are kind of coming apart. So a lot of the industries that thought themselves infallible, too big to fail, and who've just kind of kept going with the same business model forever, are starting to feel it. And you know, the kind of changes that are happening now are more fundamental, really, and that is what, you know, the name for this journey with design and business, to me, a metaphor is from the fringes to the core. Design was always a fringe activity. It happened somehow, you know, you had to slap some design on something, you know, like lipstick on a gorilla. It's basically coming in right at the end when all the strategic decisions have been already taken, all the budget's been spent, just try and make it pretty. But essentially the product is wrong. It's ill-conceived, it's badly designed, the strategy is wrong, everything's wrong. And there are industries, and there are two forces at play that really impact big business right now. And the one is technology, technological change, and consumer behavior. These two things in conjunction are actually necessitating a very different type of decision-making than what businesses are used to, and also it requires a different type of leadership. And a lot of the work we're doing right now with big businesses kind of points to the fact that designers, or people that think like designers, would actually be the perfect CEOs of large businesses. Because all of the skills that are required, yeah, thanks. Yeah, go ahead. All of the skills that are required to kind of survive and prosper in this turbulent environment that we're in, designers have that in abundance, right? So all of the kind of things that we kind of hide, and we ask for permission to enter the boardroom, and we kind of humbly take whatever's given to us, I think that whole thing is turning on its head. And actually, designers have, at the fringes, experimented with models that businesses are slowly starting to adapt. If we should take a few of the kind of corporate functions, let's talk about finance, you know, the whole thing about peer-to-peer lending or Kickstarter or those kind of models. Suddenly, banks are very interested, and all of them want peer-to-peer lending. I mean, in SA, we've got Barclays, who bought Rainfin, which is a peer-to-peer lending platform. So, you know, it kind of shows that things that designers have been doing for necessity and for lack of resources are starting to kind of come into the mainstream, and some of the origin of that thinking obviously gets lost. So as designers, we need to claim ownership of some of these principles like sharing, crowdsourcing, all of that, because it's something that, fundamentally comes from our ability to imagine business in a different way. And we have a very forward-looking view of the world as designers, and many businesses that are headed up by CAs or lawyers or others have a very backward-looking view. So they look at past performance, they extrapolate past performance. So it's not the same kind of mindset designers have. And businesses are stuck. I mean, the kind of work we do, the industries that are really struggling to survive, and we've seen industries die recently, are banks, telecoms companies, and media companies. This is not just in Africa, but allow me to make a very African kind of context here, especially financial services. I think Africa is probably the hottest place for financial service innovation right now on the planet, and we're seeing many, many banks, insurance companies coming here, trying to learn how we've actually bootstrapped services that are inconceivable in many of the legacy-driven systems that banks run all over the world. And banks are really coming apart everywhere in all parts of their business, and they're kind of lumbering these old legacy systems along, and they're not as agile, as nimble as they should be, and they fundamentally don't get people and consumers, and they don't understand people's real needs at a granular level. They get seduced by big data, which is a very abstract view of the world. And I think designers are very good both at that level of having a bold vision, but a very granular knowledge of people and their needs. And they're good at studying people, observing people, at seeing how behavior changes. And I think this is exactly the message that leaders in business are looking for, and we need to probably just think about how we package that knowledge and those skills adequately so we can actually make the most of this opportunity that's coming at us as designers. And I think the kind of core skill that I can see emerging, or the things that we end up doing, is we design businesses, basically. Whereas you design a product or a service, you're actually challenged to design the whole business around this product and service. And you're kind of having a very different conversations with clients now, because I think many of those industries that are struggling, and other speakers said that they've exhausted the kind of traditional McKinsey logic, and they've squeezed everything out of something which is a dying business model. But it takes a lot of guts for someone at the top to say, guys, we're screwed. And that is obviously a conversation that still needs to happen. But the businesses that have had this moment of clarity, where they've actually seen the end of their industry, the end of their business, those are the ones that we're finding most traction in. And those are the ones that really welcome our type of creative problem solving, our way of thinking about people and their products and their services. Because, a desk is a dangerous place from which to make decisions, right? It's not healthy to kind of drive your business. They're flying blind, right? So, and many of them are open enough to admit that now, and they're reaching out to designers. The other good thing, I think, what designers are doing, and we have many case studies of that, they're actually setting up their own businesses. I think that's the other empowering moment, that venture capital and private equity love design. And they're really reaching out to the design community. And we can see that globally as well as locally, that designers now suddenly don't have to ask for permission. They will just create their own bank. They can just do it. And they can just get access to funding and prove that they have something special. And obviously at some point, big corporates will buy them up and they'll get integrated or not. I mean, look at Airbnb. It was 2 designers starting that. It's now a $10 billion business. So, designers are able to actually become leaders, entrepreneurs, redefine the business landscape, and kind of inject a more people-centric, human-centric view of business. And that's kind of what excites me. And we keep on reading about the golden era of design is finally on us. And, obviously we need to see a lot more proof in our everyday engagement with big business. But I think there's a generational shift. Many businesses are going through this shift now, where people that are in their 40s are becoming CEOs, are getting into leadership positions. They have a very different appreciation of creativity and design, and they have a different sensitivity to connectedness, to people, to networks, and what it means to work in a networked environment. And designers are very good to facilitate that change, because they can really manage multidisciplinary teams very well. So designers can also facilitate these changes and play a very important role at reconfiguring, redesigning businesses. And I think that's the one thing that, all of us, that kind of really excites me, because, you come from that humble point where you're trying to ask for permission to do something, but we have so many tools that have awesome, have awesome impact, and big business is an important partner in the ecosystem. I think we shouldn't forget that. We do need a bit of capital to make bigger change happen. So I think, as one of the perspectives to this policy conference, I do think big business has a role to play, and government, and we've had that earlier, can also help push them along. I mean, I'm amazed by how much cities are investing. So it's a good case study for us. We can use this kind of material and prove, because that's the thing with design. You've got to have experienced it to buy it. You can't buy it off a piece of paper or a presentation or a proposal. You've got to go through that. It's got to become part of you, and then, you can't go back to normal again. So that's what I'm hoping for, that we can transform our business leaders through design. Thanks.
So I'd like to ask 1 or 2 questions, maybe 3 or 4 questions of the panelists, and then I'd like to open it to the floor. Is there any interest from the floor to ask questions? Because there are. Okay, good. Okay, good. So let me give it a quick one, and then we'll go to the floor. Johan, you spoke about the skills shortage, and especially in service design. So I've a slightly left field question for you. In the situation where there is a skills shortage, can anyone be a designer? In service design, if you want, or anywhere?
I think yes, in the current environment, the people that were called product designers inside of media or telco companies are in essence fulfilling that role. So yes, I think they are currently the designers in those roles, but they need to be assisted by people that have got a more user-centered approach, which is sorely lacking from the humanities side and from the interaction design side.
Okay.
But yes, I do think there are currently people that can substitute. There's lots of graphic designers that work in these organizations that are assisting these individuals. And as I said, the product designers.
Okay. Because, I spoke because, sorry, we'll take them after the whole thing. Can you hold that one? Sure. Obviously, I spoke because I'm not objective. I have my own point of view. So I want to link that to a question to Ulrich. If designers are to be CEOs, right? And you said that quite clearly, because there's this forward-looking thing instead of the backward-looking thing. And there have been examples in management history where management in the past, in some places, was dominated by marketing type of people. Also a forward-looking type of idea, right? What would designers have to do to be able to step into those roles? Because if we've got this gap in communication where people who are doing the design work don't realize that there are people who are trained designers that could help them, what would the designer need to do to become a CEO or to make radical social change?
Sure. Tasos, you're right. I mean, in the precursor to this conference, there's a certain temptation in policy to say everyone is a designer. We design our breakfast, we design our relationships or something. But I think in order for designers to have the kind of leadership impact that we talk about, there's a certain discipline and a certain rigor required to take an idea and translate that into a business kind of value proposition and a commercial outcome. Because if we stick to be kind of brainstormers, colorful post-it people, but something never makes money in the end, we haven't proven a point. And big business is outputs-based, outcomes-based. So in as much as we can build a fact base, that's very important data. It's been reiterated by observing people studying that, packaging that knowledge. So it's not from a shoot from the hip kind of creativity. It's a really structured, rigorous view of taking an idea, testing it from all angles, making sure it stands up, and then taking that all through. I think then you earn the respect of your peers. And I think also the proof's in the pudding. The proof will be, and it has been proven, and there's enough evidence to support that products conceived through a design thinking approach are more successful in the marketplace. Businesses that invest in design are more successful, and you've got to show that whole journey.
I'm buying into your whole story. What I want to know, and maybe I'll ask Ian the question this time around. Do you see a classically trained product designer, brand designer, fashion designer becoming a CEO of a major corporation today in South Africa? And if not, what would they have to do within themselves or within their environment to be able to do that?
I think certainly, if not jumping straight into a CEO seat, I think sitting on an exco or boards is the first step. And I think that's where a large number of companies need to open their boards and give a valuable seat to design at that particular level. I think starting up entrepreneurial companies, entrepreneurial design companies are very often started by the creative lead, and that's often just how it progresses and snowballs on. And suddenly they find themselves doing that. I think existing corporates swapping out a CEO for a creative suddenly is I don't see that happening exist right now in the existing landscape. But I also think that we should double back to where this is all birthed, which is the educational institutes, and start really looking at those in a different light and preparing designers that are entering this landscape a lot better to understand the business of business. And then combine that with their creativity. They are going to be, you know, cowboys with two guns. It's a great strength to have out there. So I just feel that designers get shot out into the world with all this design training, and then, like you say, they beg, bow, and scrape to get into meetings, and oh, thank you, you're listening to me, and etc., etc. But if they could just establish a business case clearly and succinctly, and then bolt on the design solutions to that, and the perspective that design thinking brings to it. Yeah, I think those are some kind of prerequisites to steer a ship or be at the helm.
All right, great. And okay, Dale, is someone a little bit outside of the designer bubble, because you've been making friends with people inside the bubble. From your point of view, then, something that's tangentially related. The difference that you've seen between when design succeeds and when design doesn't succeed. You spoke a little bit about it works in the lives of people, etc. But maybe could you explain from your point of view what makes the difference executionally in the business of a business between something designed well or not, whether or not there was a guy with a design degree involved?
I think in the industry that I'm involved in, there's very few actual designers. Software is essentially a support function in a business. But that said, you ask about the difference between where it's successful or not successful. Where people have strung together a number of functions and called it a business process and implemented it, they've encountered a huge amount of resistance. And typically, this is the scenario where the IT department provides the business with a solution. That is a recipe for disaster. Where the business then partners with IT in terms of looking at how things are currently structured and how they need to be structured to move forward, those are the success stories. I'll give an example. The project that I mentioned, there were a number of spin-offs to that whole project. One of them was that the business process was revisited. And as a process, they discovered that there were a number of steps in that process that were completely irrelevant. They'd been put in place as a control historically, but with the system being implemented and that process then being implemented within the system, the controls were now in the system. You didn't need the people for the controls. One or two of them need to be notified. Listen, there's a change that's happened in the system. But in essence, there was no requirement for those people to physically go and have to approve anything.
Okay.
So the requirement needs to come from the requirement needs to come from the source. And I think the challenge in solving a problem is probably identifying the actual problem. And I think a lot of people miss that.
Asking the right question.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay. Well, and the reason I ask you is because one of the founder of one of the world's largest ERP systems companies, SAP, hates his product, right? This is common knowledge. It's not controversial, and loves design, and has not yet been able to reconcile those two things so that he can design a better product that can design better businesses. So it's that is a meta problem for you, Dale.
My question's for John on the far left. With the emergence of so many new kinds of surfaces and the material technology changing so fast and the printing technology changing so fast, are we not falling behind, and the surface design needs to be focusing more on getting the technology into the technicons so that surface designers are trained with these new mediums and new materials?
I think Well, I don't know why they would need materials specifically, but I think service design is a combination of the current skill sets that are already being provided inside of the technicons. So it should be probably part of a foundation course within your graphic design, product design, and industrial design, interior architecture, and information design. I don't see it as a software specifically. A technology that you've got to insert there to get the students to learn, or material specifically.
My question is about brain drain. When we worked for the diagnostics for Brazil, for design in Brazil, we built 3 scenarios to close the report. One was pessimist, moderate, and conservative, and optimist. On the pessimist and the moderate or conservative, we had, one of the main threats we had was the brain drain. If our talents were leaving Brazil, if they didn't want to stay there. We had the same issue with Uruguay, and I believe that this is a common issue, especially for developing countries. So I want to know, how do you see this? Do you have problems in keeping talent here in South Africa? Or you mentioned about attracting talent, and some issues about regulation. And Ludo mentioned about creating a good environment to attract talents and to make talents stay in Auckland. So I just want to know from you what you think about this, about retaining talent here, and if you have problems with this.
I think all of us can actually answer that question in terms of I think some of our top talent often does, well, they do get poached and they go overseas and they work there. And that could be for various reasons. It could be for personal security reasons and so forth. It could be to grow your own career, to get more experience internationally. To give you an example, when I was working with our team that flew in from London to do this work for the specific client, the interaction designers would do between 5 and 6 projects in a year when they work in London. In South Africa, that same type of individual might only get that experience over 3 years. So you can see the attraction for somebody in South Africa if you're really talented and you want to join an international firm. The amount of experience that you will gain in about 3 years is the equivalent that you would do in South Africa in a decade. So the opportunities and the quality of people that you can work with overseas, I think, is quite attractive. And as I said, there's some other social issues in South Africa that people reconsider staying in specific areas, like Johannesburg as an example.
I think that it's not so much just the companies trying to say, look at us, we're shiny, we're great, we offer you this, etc., etc. I think it's a lot what Ludo spoke about. I mean, at the end of Ludo's talk, I want to go and have a little chat with him, and can I come and help design Auckland? You know, he did a great sales job on that. So to me, if the cities that we live in and the countries that we live in do a lot more work around publicizing what a huge part of the future design is going to be in making this a beautiful place to be in, that gets you excited. That makes you want to stay. It makes you want to participate. And I think it's probably one of the biggest failings that a lot of cities within South Africa do, is they just don't talk up these big plans they have. I mean, I live in Durban and I travel around the world, but I mean, I was furious with the city for so poorly revealing what it was going to be doing over the next 10 years. You know, it kind of broke on us as breaking news all the time, when we could have so easily participated in that journey, contributed to that journey, and been excited about the city. And I think that groundswell of excitement about where you live and the communities you live within and how you can contribute at a micro level and a macro level is hugely important to address this brain drain concern. Otherwise, people feel I've got to shoot off and go and get experience to come back to get a better job here to earn more cash, when it's a completely that model is dead and dying. And I look to the governments and cities to do a lot more marketing and PR about how we can retain talent in the country.
Ulrich also has...
Maybe a quick one as well on that. We've seen many of our designers wanting to spread their wings and go abroad to learn more, and especially the kind of experiences that Johan's spoken to in a very more mature, sophisticated design environment. Most of them are coming back, though. I think Africa is a very exciting space to fast-track your career as a designer. It's a pioneer kind of mindset. You get to reinvent things. You get to do things faster, quicker, more experimental. more agile, because there's nothing, right? You're designing on a blank canvas, and that's very appealing. So we're seeing lots of interest from people abroad that are actually stifled by the bureaucracy, the overregulation of other more developed markets. And I mean, I myself spent over 10 years abroad, and I'm really happy to be back now, and I can do a lot more things than I couldn't when I had a design business in Denmark, and it was great. But there are other things I can do here, so I'm happy to sell this destination as something to experiment
You'll
in.
notice the coastal city guys talk quite confidently. I'm from Pretoria, so oh yeah, local people would know.
Good day. Thank you so much for the panel team. My name is Vincent Zondo. I'm within the Marketing Directorate for Arts and Culture. So my question is in two folds, and I'm going to ask it as both maybe someone who spent about 10 years in marketing and then ventured into our South African arts and culture. We've got a couple of problems, and I do hear the panel discussing things around design and how design could work. But maybe if I could extend that in terms of my question, I've been fortunate to work with arts and culture, hence these platforms like the design policy, let's talk about it, in the effort of government trying to make sure that we engage businesses as we do and design a design policy. Excellent work by my colleagues. But my question is around, there's a huge lack of artists, designers in South Africa, especially coming from the training. It's a conversation I had with some of them as well, and some of the clients I've had, where designers or artists in South Africa lack the ability to present, as you have mentioned earlier, a business case to businesses in order to get funding, or you give them 10 rand and they'll not be able to give you return on investment. And my question then is, how do we start to bridge that gap? Because what often happens is in school, you know, the rapid jogs where maybe not the smartest, but you're finding sports is able to say, okay, I need 10 rand, there'll be 6 people who are watching between this time and this time, so your return on investment is 1, 2, 3. Whilst a lot of artists, designers in South Africa, the emerging ones especially, battle with that the most. So that's the first question in terms of, as someone who's always constantly trying to drive that intel to say, how do we link businesses? Because the spreadsheet doesn't change. The CFO wants to know, you took 10K, where is it? And if a designer is going to do something, what have they done with it? And more often than not, the lack of service, not service, demand and supply. So that's the one question in terms of what's then potentially the solution for the industry at large, not just design, but artists, musicians, designers, crafters, etc.
Okay. I just think it's, again, to the point that was made in that earlier discussion, that first panel discussion this morning, the future is going to be about, I love the analogy of dropping the windows and collaborating, don't work in isolation. And I think exposing artists and designers to raw business and exposing raw business to how the artists and design processes work is critical. So it's going to have to be sort of some sort of scrum down that starts to happen where designers can participate. I look to the educational institutes, but I'll also look to the industry at large and start opening the doors, start inviting designers into meetings that ordinarily wouldn't have been invited into, and start letting them see the business end of the stick and understand the business end of the stick, and at the same time give them the opportunity to flare and be a little bit radical and explain and etc. etc. People don't understand how to manage designers very well or how to listen to designers very well. They want a direct answer. They miss the peripheral fringes, the broader point designers often try and land. And I think if they could learn to listen a little bit better, and maybe a little bit training on that, understand is that, you know, I get the gist of what you're saying. It came with a lot of extra packaging, but the point is clear. And I think
that so nicely.
Yeah, and I think that often that's a skill that business needs to learn, and I think designers need to catch a wake up. If we've been thrown into this huge world of opportunity now, and design's golden era has arrived. We've got to stop just worrying about making things pretty and understand the business end of the stick a lot more.